Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the live stream here at McClunky Gaming of the Star Wars Unlimited Regional Qualifier in Minneapolis, Minnesota. We are set for round 12 of Swiss, just 2 more rounds to go, including this round right here. And looks like here at the feature table, we're going to see a pretty interesting matchup. Quinlan Tarkentown versus Anakin Blue, showcase leader versus showcase leader. I'm Josh Snyder, Tower number 9 with me to bring you some commentary. Tower, what an event it's been so far.
Yeah, Josh, it's been really exciting. We've had some good matches here on the stream, and this is going to be an interesting one too. I think Quinlan versus Anakin could be a war of the discard decks if both of these players are indeed running the force throws, the pillages, the general discard package that is available with these builds.
Starting out game number 1, we've got Quinlan taking the first action with Sabine coming down into the ground arena and C3PO on Anakin's side of the table.
Yep, the C3PO is, maybe not going to be as reliable or whatever as in this scenario where Rey can buff him up and you can get an R2 out as well. But Anakin's ability works great with C3PO here. Could be used to defeat Sabine and leave C3PO on the board at the cost of a bit more base damage.
Now,
That's just what we're going to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Great use of that Anakin ability. So it is on the left, we have Derek Schwartz piloting Quinlan Tarkentown, and it's Jeff Gray on the right piloting Anakin Blue. We are going to see Anakin coming out on Cassian coming out on turn 2, and then we're going to see a Yoda on the opposite side of the table.
Yoda, a quite relevant card here. Not only a 2/4 with Restore 2, which is pretty solid in its own right, but also has the Force trait, so enables those Force throws, and when defeated, draws a card.
Now, here's an interesting play. Kira coming out for Derek. He gets to take a look at Jeff's hand, and then he can name a card. And while Kira is in play, that card will cost an additional 3 resources.
Yeah, so what do you pick here, Josh? We're looking at Luke Skywalker Jedi Knight is probably the best card in the hand, either that or Force Throw, but can't be played for a while. And then we have a Yoda, a copy of Open Fire, the Force Throw. What are we thinking here? Is the problem also is if he says Force Throw, Jeff can actually still play it.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I think it is a tough call for sure. And it looks like he did write it down on a piece of paper and put it on the Kira, but I can't quite make out what it says. Can you, Tower?
No, it's there's a bit of glare there from the lighting. I think it's not quite legible to me. Hopefully Claire will be able to Claire will be able to tell us what was named there.
All right, so Anakin's ability used, and it looks like we are going to have C3PO attacking into Kira for 3. C3PO defeated, and I do not think Jeff named the proper cost there, does not get the card advantage. Cassian getting in for 3, so 10 damage on Jeff's base. And Yoda is poised to now take out Kira.
Yeah, SWU Neff in chat saying LOL for a second. I thought that was Anakin's board state, but it's just Kira looking at his hand. Yeah, if Anakin had had all those cards on the field, it would be a pretty desirable state there for Derek. Now we're seeing Kira being defeated here by combined attacks from C3PO and Yoda using that Anakin's ability to get the extra 2 damage.
Yeah,
The named card was Force Throw, Claire confirms, but not super relevant now that Kira's off the field.
And with Kira off the board, Force Throw played, and you see Anakin, the new 2-cost Anakin pilot unit, actually discarded there 2 to Cassian, and then Open Fire will be played to finish off Cassian. Derek's board is clear here.
Yeah, interesting turn there. Jeff left as the only one with a card on the board, and it's that Yoda who can potentially swing in here for 2 damage to Derek's side and also some restore. Now, we could, of course, see Derek use his Tarkin Town to clear Yoda, but he might be saving it for a later opportunity. If he has a 3-cost unit, he could play one and use Quinlan's ability to ping Yoda off the field instead, which might be a better option.
So now
And there it
with
is.
the first action, yeah, look at that. The ping is going to take out Yoda as Cassian is smuggled into play and he is ready.
Yeah. The now you might be wondering why that would work like that because Cassian is smuggled in for 5 cost. But the ability there on Quinlan is based on the cost, which is the printed cost, not based on the cost that you actually paid. So smuggling in a unit, you still use the base cost for Quinlan's ability.
So there we go. Yoda right back out for Jeff. Quinlan is deployed. And now
Yeah, that second Yoda that we saw from the Kira look there.
now here comes a way to kind of shut down something that Derek wants to play. Jeff's going to play Regional Governor. You get to name a card when played, and while Regional Governor is in play, Derek will not be able to play that card. Now, of course, Derek is showing a way to answer Regional Governor on board. You have 2 3-power units that could attack and defeat the Governor, but we'll see how Derek responds after the Governor comes down.
Quinlan flips a turn before Anakin and could generate some value. Swinging on that Governor.
Whatever the governor called, it seems like Derek doesn't want that governor to stick around. So, governor do believe, oh no, he's going to put some damage on Yoda here. So 3 damage on each of those units. And now the epic action on Tarkin Town used to defeat Yoda. Jeff does get an extra card, but Yoda off the board.
Yep. Okay. Okay. Regional Governor still on the field, but at only 1 HP left, would actually be removed at this point by almost any unit Derek could play, coupled with Quinlan's ability. Because when Quinlan is deployed, you no longer have to match the cost. It's just if you play a unit that has greater cost, that ability also works.
Yeah, that is an excellent point. So regional governor very susceptible to being taken out with the Quinlan ping. And now with the first action, Jeff is going to use the Anakin ability to attack with regional governor, giving it +2 power to trade with Cassian Andor.
Claire saying that the card named by that regional governor had been Plo Koon, as I think someone had speculated in chat. Quinlan swinging in for 3 damage to base here. And here comes Anakin.
Now, Anakin is +2 power with 13 damage currently on Jeff's base. So Anakin is a 6/7 with Overwhelm. And keep in mind, Quinlan only has 6 HP remaining. So Jeff could absolutely take out Derek's leader.
Huh. Smuggled L3 here from Derek. That's a little low impact for this phase in the game, in my opinion.
Oh, now here comes one of the very strong plays with this Anakin deck. Anakin getting the Jedi lightsaber, getting +3/+3. Anakin is huge and will get that -2/-2 ability. Open fire is played. 4 damage to the Quinlan, and here comes Anakin. Quinlan will be defeated with the -2/-2 and all of the damage, which is going to be a total of 9, I believe, is going to go to base because of Overwhelm.
That is a harsh development for Derek. I think this turn really didn't go the way that he maybe would have hoped. The only thing that he brought out was smuggling an L337, a unit that can sometimes be played on turn 1, didn't use all his resources, and then got hit by this Jedi lightsaber on Anakin, losing Quinlan and taking a big chunk of damage on the base. Derek now feels like he's substantially behind.
Yeah, that was an absolutely explosive turn for Jeff with Anakin plus the lightsaber. Derek with his back against the wall right now. That 2-2 droid, no match for the very large Anakin Skywalker right now that has a total again of 9 power and 10 health. What
Now,
did
what put a point of damage on Anakin there? Shouldn't he have defeated Quinlan and not taken any damage with return in return?
I do
What
bel I do think
did they
that was the
misplay that?
play.
What was that?
I think you're right because Quinlan only had 2 HP remaining. And look at this. Derek's going to just go ahead and scoop it up. He just doesn't have an answer for the very large Anakin Skywalker. And this, game one, is going to go to Jeff.
That was really something. It looked like Derek was doing decently well there until that Anakin flip turn had massive value for Jeff, and Derek's only play was to smuggle out that L3. It's really tough when one player is getting some of their best plays and the other is, unable to make full use of their resources. Very interesting.
Yeah, like I was saying, the 2-2 droid, no match for the Anakin Skywalker that was swinging for 9. And then again, of course, having the Force trait, the additional ability with Jedi lightsaber giving the unit -2/-2 on attack is so good because then even if that unit is defeated with that on attack ability, the overwhelm damage, all of that damage then goes to base. And that is just a potent little combo between Anakin and Jedi lightsaber that Jeff was able to pull out. And he's off to a great start here in round 12.
Yep, it's going to be interesting to see how things change as we move on into game 2. But one thing that Derek did do here that we haven't always seen players doing on these streams is he scooped for time relatively early. And that is going to mean that if they do end up going to the third game, they're going to have some extra time with which to hopefully bring the match to a natural conclusion rather than a draw.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely want to see one of the players walk away with a win instead of a draw. But what a first game. Tower, what do you think needs to be done a little bit differently on the Quinlan side to maybe turn the tide here? I know obviously you talked about, the big turning point was when all he had on that, that big flip turn for Jeff was just the droid. Is there anything else that kind of stood out for you or that you're looking for Derek going into game 2?
I think that one of the big questions, in my opinion, about this is there some way for Derek to deal with Anakin? Anakin Skywalker is one of the stronger leader flips in the game. Historically speaking, I think a lot of leaders that flip on 6 resources have not always been as good, just because it's a kind of delayed timing compared to the other leaders, and you don't always get huge value in exchange for that delayed timing. But Anakin Skywalker is a leader that can get extremely high power with the scaling power based on damage on your base. And I think he was kind of the key factor there that made that game so difficult for Derek once he flipped. So I'm wondering if Derek has any good ways to answer Anakin. One thing that we could potentially see is, Han Solo, reluctant hero, can't come out on the turn that Anakin flips, but could potentially be the first action of the next turn to get Anakin off the board. Or maybe some scenario we could see a forced throw. Maybe Anakin flips and Derek force throws a 7 cost card from his own hand to defeat him. That's going to be, I think, something that I'm looking to see in game 2. How will Derek be able to deal with that Anakin Skywalker leader flip?
Yeah, I think that's spot on. That's what this match really comes down to. And especially when Anakin is staring down a 25 HP base. It just makes it that much more difficult because now you're working with less HP, and Anakin can swing very big, and that's what we saw in game one. Now, in game two, Derek will start with the initiative. We'll see if he can kind of get ahead early and set himself up for that answer on Anakin Skywalker. But if he can't answer him, this could be a quick 2-0 victory for Jeff.
Yep. I think that and I think there are other cards that also play into this. One other thing that is conceivable, we didn't see it here, but in general, if you can be firing off your force throws and your opponent cannot, that can be a pretty good position to be in just because that card is so powerful. So we could see one player or the other getting a real advantage in terms of attacking the hand. Didn't really happen last game, but could happen in this next one.
So starting out in this game, Derek copying his turn one play from game one. We see Sabine Wren, explosives artist, coming down into the ground arena. And no turn one play there for Jeff, but he will play Cassian to start turn two. Not having a turn one play definitely doesn't seem ideal here, but maybe it was a situation where the turn one play that he had maybe just gets eaten up by Sabine, and Sabine stays on the board. Not sure if what he had in his hand. But now we've got Derek, his action, Sabine ready in the ground arena. Staring down the Cassian. And we're going to see Hot Shot Blaster being smuggled in onto Sabine, trading with Cassian here and just cleaning up the board on turn two.
Yeah, it's interesting. Hot Shot Deal 44 Blaster remains one of the most popular smuggle cards. I think I'm not sure which are popular between that and Cassian himself. Maybe Tech up there as well. But very, very strong card. Offers a similar benefit to something like a Surprise Strike and can be played via smuggle.
So here on turn three, Jeff playing Kanan Jarrus, and then we see Millennium Falcon coming out and entering play ready, dealing 3 damage to Jeff's base. We've got 5 damage on Jeff's base.
We are now in that scenario though where Jeff has a force unit on the board and Derek does not. We could see some force throws being fired off by Jeff here, and I think I see one in the hand there on that right side hand cam. Force throw potentially going to be a problem here for Derek.
Yeah, you've talked about force throw, and both of these decks, the force throw is so important. And if you can fire that force throw off consistently with the force unit, you will certainly have the edge. And right now, Jeff has that force unit ready to go. Now look at this. Derek actually just going to bounce the Falcon back to hand, not paying the Falcon tax. So he does still have 5 ready resources. And Jeff is going to start with another force unit as he plays Yoda with his first action.
I wonder, yeah. So there's a Poe Dameron in hand for Derek, but I'm not sure this is so good because in this scenario, Jeff can just use Anakin's ability and trade Kanan for Poe. Might not even have to. Here comes that force throw.
Force throw with the force units in play. We'll see what Derek discards here. He knows that Jeff has the information of Millennium Falcon. He's going to discard the Falcon. That's 3 damage to Poe Dameron, and here comes Quinlan.
Okay, Quinlan flips. Now we see Anakin's ability is used, but the target isn't going to be that Poe. It's actually going to be Quinlan himself. Ends up doing 6 damage there. Does he have some way to do that extra damage? We could now see Tarkentown being used to clear Kanan as well on Derek's side of the board here. But the
Boy,
initiative
Derek
is taken
actually,
instead.
yeah, just claiming, and Jeff passes. So lots of damage spread out right now. Poe, Kanan, Quinlan,
Poe
all
could get a
very,
2 for
very.
1 here.
Yeah, he
We could
could.
see
You're
Poe
absolutely right.
attack Yoda, discard a card with the on attack ability to deal 2 damage to Kanan, get both of those off the board. In theory, you might want to hold Poe to be potentially able to attack and defeat Anakin. But in this scenario, I don't think it's very realistic because in the event that Derek were trying to do that, Jeff could just use one of his existing units to trade for Poe.
So with Derek having the initiative, let's see where he goes. Does he take that big 2-for-1 play that you were just talking about? He is going to attack and defeat Yoda on attack ability, discarding red 5, 2 damage to Kanan, both units defeated, and now Jeff will have to start back with no units on his board.
Yeah, and to make matters worse for Jeff, that play actually leaves Poe still on the field with 1 HP. I'm really curious why Jeff chose to send that Kanan attack into Quinlan rather than attacking Poe and getting him off the field. But we may see that soon.
And now Jeff
Takedown for
gonna play,
Quinlan.
yeah, takedown. Will send Quinlan Voss back to the base zone and action back over to Derek. He is going to smuggle in Cassian. Another Cassian Andor here. And here comes the big one, Anakin Skywalker. Only +1 power right now with 5 damage on Jeff's base. Cassian will get in for 3, and we'll see where Anakin goes. He is currently a 5/7. Anakin will attack and defeat the Poe Dameron. 6 damage back to Anakin Skywalker, 4 overwhelm damage going through to Derek's base, but Derek does have the initiative and just on the board showing a way to trade with Anakin.
Yeah, it's interesting here. We're looking at now it's Anakin with 1 HP left facing off with Cassian Andor. Do you
And
think that's going to just end up being a trade here, Josh?
unless Derek has another way to take him out, maybe through the Quinlan ping, I don't know he's running any 6-cost units, but unless he has another way to do it, I think you've got to take Anakin off the board. And he is going to make that trade. Cassian for Anakin. And taking a look at the hand cams, we did see Hot Shot Blaster down in Derek's resource row. So keep that in mind. It could come in play here very soon.
Ooh, good point there, Josh. Those hotshot blasters are very relevant. And Spark of Rebellion now for Derek, taking a look at Jeff's hand and seeing some powerful cards. What will Derek choose to remove?
So now Jeff is at 7 resources. We see the very potent Luke Skywalker. Also some other good cards here. You've got Redemption that could be coming out next turn. Definitely has some options, but I would personally be surprised if he doesn't take out Luke, but he's actually going
Mm.
to hit Fell the Dragon.
Josh, my prediction would have been the same as yours here, but Derek is the experienced Quinlan player, not me. And yeah, it is going to be Luke Skywalker then played for Jeff, even though there's no target for the when played ability.
So Jeff
Hmm.
will be able to take the initiative after Derek plays Poe Dameron. I'm wondering, maybe Derek didn't take the Luke because he has Han Solo Reluctant Hero in hand, which with Quinlan's ability would be able to take out Luke and Han would stay on the board. But Jeff having the first action, Luke on the board, we are going to see him attack and defeat Poe Dameron and just 1 HP remaining for Luke Skywalker.
Now, I do think Derek also has not used his Tarkin Town yet, if I understand correctly. So could be using that here and getting Luke off the field without having to play a card. He would then still be able to hold that Han Reluctant Hero in hand and potentially answer whatever Jeff's next play is, with the caveat that there is that Redemption Medical Frigate, which Han isn't a good answer to.
Here we go. Han Solo Reluctant Hero Quinlan Ping is going to take out Luke Skywalker. And now Derek, the one left with the big threat on the board, the 6/6 Han Solo.
Yep. Now, I do think that using Quinlan's ability here is potentially a very minor misplay because Han's ambush that avoids taking damage if he defeats the target would have defeated Luke anyway. So Quinlan's ability didn't need to be used, and it would preserve the threat of potentially using Quinlan's ability if both players play one drops. But that scenario is unlikely enough that I don't think that I don't think it's really that big a deal to have used Quinlan there.
Now, here's an interesting play on the other side of the table for Jeff. Obi-Wan Kenobi coming out and regional governor. So let's see what the call is this time around.
Now, the funny thing about Obi-Wan Kenobi here is that Han can just attack and defeat him in one swing and not take any damage in return. But the when defeated effect would then be able to buff up that regional governor.
Yeah, that is absolutely right. Derek does have the first action, so taking out Obi-Wan Kenobi probably going to be priority number one here, unless he has something a little bit different planned based on what he has in his hand. I am curious, can you
And
tell what the paper shows there? Is it
Claire reports that the named card there was Enfys
the
Nest.
Fist Nest? Okay, awesome. So first action, Han Solo attacking, defeating Obi-Wan, not taking any damage back. 2 experience tokens to Regional Governor, but Jeff is going to follow up with a huge play here. Crate Dragon has entered the ground arena.
Crate Dragon's a massive card here, Josh. The 10-10 stat line with Overwhelm is extremely powerful, but even maybe more relevant than the stats on that crate dragon is the ability that allows you to punish the opponent with damage either to their base or to a ground unit based on the cost of anything they play. This can really be essentially a lockdown in a lot of scenarios, and I'm not sure Derek's going to have a clean answer.
This is trouble for Derek if he doesn't have an answer. I'm seeing force throws in hand, but he doesn't have a force unit in play, so that wouldn't deal any damage. We know he has Hot Shot Blaster in the resource row, but even if he were to take the initiative, the Hot Shot Blaster on Han is only 8 power total, and it's not enough to take out Crate.
Yeah, I think one option he does have here is we could see the Hotshot Blaster from the row, buff Han, hit crate for 8. It would be alive on 2 HP, and Derek could then clear it with Tarkin Town.
So we are going to see Surprise Strike here. Surprise
Still not
Strike
enough
with
damage.
Han. Yeah, not quite. Dealing 9 damage to Crate Dragon, 2 damage to base off of the Crate trigger. And now Crate gets 1 swing at least, going in for 10. That is 19 damage on Derek's base. But as you called it, Tarkin Town is still there. And my goodness, what a thing to save Tarkin Town for, saving you from Crate Dragon. We do see the regional governor getting it for 3, 22 damage on Derek's base dragon. We do see the regional governor getting it for 3, 22 damage on Derek's base. 3 HP remaining. Jeff's got to find 3 damage to win this
Derek's
match.
in trouble here, and one other thing that I've noticed is that it appears to me that they neglected to pay the resources for that surprise strike. That should have been 2 resources at the start of the turn, I believe.
Yes, you are absolutely right. He should have exhausted 2. We see 7 exhausted for Han Solo. Han once again coming out, ambushing and defeating the regional governor. So now Enfys Nest can be played. Jeff putting down Redemption. Derek does not have an answer for the big 6-9 ship in space, and that is going to do it. Jeff with a decisive 2-0 victory in round 12.
Yep, that was a tough one for Derek. You know, it wasn't that bad, but once the crate dragon hit the field, that was a big problem for Derek. The stats there, the 10-10 stat line, very difficult for him to clear, especially because that ability can be so disruptive. And while he was able to do it, he took a lot of damage in the process and then didn't have an answer for that redemption medical frigate.
Yeah, what a match for Jeff. Crate Dragon is most of the time big time trouble if you don't have a very quick response. And if Crate can get 1 swing in, it's very, very difficult. The odds are highly in your favor of winning that game if you can untap and swing with Crate, and that's exactly what Jeff was able to do in game two. So Crate Dragon really stealing the game in game two, and it was Anakin doing the big work in game one.
Yeah, interesting scenario, and ultimately one deck, pretty strong spot. We're looking now at the crowd feed, and there's someone in the background twirling a lightsaber, it looks like. And as we can see, the tables are more sparsely populated now than they were earlier on in the event, with I think some people maybe having gone home, others off to the sides out of the camera feed playing side events, and a relatively small number of tables for the competitors that are still playing out their games. But we do have an ample amount of time in the round. We may try to get another match moved onto the stream so we can keep going here in the 12th round of Swiss play at the Minneapolis Regional.
It has been a fantastic event. We have seen so many exceptional plays from great players throughout this tournament. And interesting little fact going into this round, Tower, we've both talked about it. Oh, Fear, Wu from KTOD, he has been on a roll, 11 and 0 now going into this round. So we'll see if Wu is able to continue to stay undefeated. What a run it has been for him. His current match is not reported, and it's an actual interesting matchup. You've got Ophir versus Frank in this round, Kira Dadavault versus Darth Vader yellow, and we saw that yesterday. We saw Frank actually get a draw against another Kira deck. So that I'm sure is a very interesting matchup going on right now. And yeah, take a look again. We've got the stats top 64 meta. I think Claire's going to put it up for us.
Yeah, so the backup matches have concluded. So we're gonna take a quick look at some stats and then take a break here. Top 64 deck meta. Kira, the most played in the top 64 with eight Kira players there, seven Hans, five Han one, seven Han two. It's a fair mix here. It's a fair mix here in the top 64.
Yeah, absolutely. Kira the most represented. All of the Kira decks that made it to day two were Data Vault, but then the other leaders, we actually see a little bit of a break. Outside of Darth Vader, I do believe that Darth Vader from Jump to Lightspeed, all of those decks that made day two, also just the Darth Vader yellow, but Han Solo, the Shadows of the Galaxy Han Solo, we had the 7 Data Vault, and then the 1 Han 2 Blue, which we saw Cole on. We saw him on stream earlier. But yeah, pretty good, diverse meta still here in day two. Some of the big hitters, though, at the top with Han, both Han, Sabine, Ray, and Kira. A lot of these decks that many were expecting to be most represented coming into this weekend.
Yeah. And I think it's been I think we're seeing some of the shifts in the meta that follow up the Django suspension, which also removed triple dark raid and the infamous DJ. Prior to that suspension, I think Han 1 was wildly more popular than Han 2. And I think we also saw stuff like I think we also saw stuff like Quinlan being a much more present part of the meta, a lot more Tarkin Town builds. Han Solo from Shadows wasn't popular. Darth Vader from Jump to Lightspeed wasn't really a big deal competitively, and it's really shifted since.
Yeah, it absolutely has. Ever since the suspensions, things have really opened up in a big way in terms of the meta, and many players saying this is the most healthy meta that the game has had to date. Just so many viable options every single tournament. We also taking a look at the top 20 standings coming into this round. Of course, Ophir on top was undefeated coming into round 12. Cole coming in at 10 and 1. He's also had a very big tournament. And then we have Frank and Alex Blandon there rounding out the top four. So a couple Team KTOD guys in the top four coming into this round, but you also see a couple Bothan Network guys there, at least in the top eight. So yeah, this has been it's been a great tournament for both KTOD and Bothan Network. You've got the Canadian team that's having a really big run with Cole, and then also Team Secret doing well also with the Conroe brothers, both still in the top 20.
Yeah. And I believe that among the McClunky gaming players, I think Tim, aka Titanic, one of the people responsible for this stream, is still in the event. He made the cut, and I believe he is still fighting, and
Yeah,
we'll see
absolutely.
how that goes as things go on. I think one of the other streams that's covering this actually had a match that he won.
Yeah, that's great. Love to see Tim having a big run here in Minneapolis. Tim and Claire both do a lot of work to provide these streams. We're very thankful for that and hope to see Tim. Would love to see him make it all the way to the top eight. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, I think so, and yeah, once again, a big shout out to Tim and a big shout out to Claire for making these possible. And Claire, in particular, is the one giving us the information about what is going on with these cards, where they have to name a specific for making these possible. And Claire, in particular, is the one giving us the information about what is going on with these cards, where they have to name a specific thing, and trying to fix the internet and go and talk to the judges if a big error is spotted. Really great to have her support. So shout out once more to Claire and Tim.
Yeah, absolutely. So much hard work goes into it, and Claire does a fantastic job during the stream smoothly. But I do think we are going to cut to a break. We've got some more time. We were unable to break, and then we will be back with the final round of Swiss here in Minneapolis. Stay tuned. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the live stream of the Minneapolis Regional Qualifier. We are getting ready for the final round of Swiss. It has been a long 12-round tournament so far. We're in day two where we had the top 64 players, and now it all comes down to this one final round as these players try to secure a spot in the top eight. I'm Josh Snyder. Tower number 9 is alongside with me. Tower, how are we feeling at this stage?
Well, I think it's really, really an interesting scenario. We've had some great matches on the stream, and one thing that I've noticed is it appears to me that Ophir, aka Wu, is not the only undefeated player, but there isn't even anyone else at the event who is 11-1. Wu is 12-0, and then the next best is 10-2.
Yeah, absolutely incredible run from Wu in this tournament. I think it's safe to say that this result and what he's doing right now through this tournament, he's already locked in the top 8 at 12-0 right now. So he could lose this last round. He's going to be in the top 8, but not only that, but I think what he's done over this weekend, he's going to I think he's going to get a few more followers, Tower. That Tower's
Yeah,
his
I think
channel
it's
his channel's already
think
been
it's pretty
blowing up.
likely. Yeah, so Wu is as we creator and has, a Patreon and even does some coaching stuff. And, like you said, Josh, I think results like this are going to be a good advertisement for his content.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's going to be a busy man in the coming weeks as players look to prepare for the Galactic Championship, which is just 2 months away now. Crazy, but just 2 months away from the Galactic Championship. And all 8 of the players that make the top 8 in this tournament will get not only a day one bye in the Galactic Championship, but also will have their flight paid to Las Vegas to participate in that tournament. Now, and I think we've talked about this before on Stream Tower, but there could be some buys that end up passing down. Is that correct? But yeah, as to my understanding, if there are players that make the top 8 in this event, for instance, Wu is one of those players that has a day one bye already, as he did win a planetary qualifier. That would mean that his buy will pass down to someone outside of the top 8. Say that the ninth place in the standings didn't have a buy, that buy would pass down. And that is going to be interesting, right? Even if you don't make the top 8, some of these players could still earn their day one buy, which everyone would certainly love to have. Now, we are going to have something a little spicy for you here on Stream Tower. Check this out: Han Green versus Tarkin Yellow.
Oh yeah, okay. Tarkin Yellow. I think we had discussed this in one of yesterday's. I believe it was in one of yesterday's match. A deck that was quite popular at one time hasn't been as popular recently, but might still have what it takes here, and very notable with the Lurking TIE Phantom in particular. But Han Green is often a deck that has kind of a space aggro style to it. So Lurking TIE Phantom might not be the greatest card in that scenario. We'll have to see just how these matches end up going.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the classic lines for this Tarkin Yellow deck, right? Being able to get the TIE Phantom out, put the experience tokens on it, and then you have a space unit that becomes very, very difficult to deal with. The only problem in this particular matchup, like you mentioned, Han has a lot of options. Could have Blue Leader, multiple Millennium Falcons that could come out early and just shut down that TIE Phantom before it can ever really get going.
Yeah, the Lurking TIE Phantom is an interesting one. It's extremely resilient to a lot of removal type effects, but it's so vulnerable to the opponent just playing normal space units.
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely excited to see how this match goes. Again, final round of Swiss. It looks like we have Alex on the right piloting Han and David on the left piloting Tarkin. It looks as though Alex is going to start with the initiative. Now, Tower, with us talking a little bit about the lurking TIE Phantom and how it may not be great in this particular matchup, what may be another line that David could look for early to maybe get some good pressure going?
Yeah, that's a good question, Josh. So I think I don't know exactly what David's build is running here. One interesting scenario would be there is the option to go to the ground. Traditionally speaking, a ground start is often better against Spark of Rebellion Han than a space start because a space start risks getting hit by a turn one Falcon. And look at that. Bazine tall played, and we see not only a Falcon, but also a stolen AT hauler and a pilot Han in hand.
You know, David was certainly hoping to blank Alex's first turn. Alex used that Han action ability on the first action, going up to 3 resources, and David playing Bazine certainly hoped that there was only one 3-cost play. Unfortunately, there was 2 space units with the Millennium Falcon and stolen AT Hauler, and now Alex has a very large, good statted space unit early in game 1.
Yep. You know, those Bazine starts, sometimes you can blank out what your opponent's starting play was going to be and put them in a tough spot, but not great when you use Bazine, or for that matter, something like Spark of Rebellion, and see essentially 2 copies of the thing you're trying to prevent. May have been able to take one of those early units, but there's another one, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So David with the initiative here, Bazine is going to strike first, dealing the first damage, first base damage here in game 1. And we do get a little bit of information from Rebel Trader. Thank you for sharing this. Vika won the Take the Initiative League with this Tarkin just a few months ago, so that's very cool.
Hey, that's
Oh,
really something.
that is a play. Alex making the hauler very big with the Han Solo pilot upgrade. Now, did get to attack and got 6 damage into David's base, but Waylay bouncing the hauler back to hand, and that Han pilot upgrade sent to the discard pile.
Yeah, you know, is it the best possible solution? I'm not sure, but it's at least going to delay the damage coming in here. Now, one awkward part about this is the only unit that David has developed here is Bazine Natal, and Bazine Natal, normally these Tarkin decks want to be playing some kind of Imperial unit early on that they can start throwing buffs onto. But David hasn't been able to do that, at least in this game.
Yeah, excellent point. No Imperial plays early for David. It's been very defensive with the Bazine, trying to pull out that turn 1 play, having Waylay, and now Alex going to make another big play. Blue leader coming in, paying the 2 extra resources. That's now a 5-5 in the ground arena, ambushing and defeating Bazine. But now, Tower, now we're going to see an Imperial coming out.
Yeah, it's the classic Seventh Fleet Defender, a unit that's been very effective at a bunch of different times in the game's lifespan, and is also a quite relevant one in this matchup because the shield on that defender makes it more resilient in the event that Alex brings out some of his own space units. So might be a much better option than that lurking TIE Phantom here.
Yeah, I could not agree with you more. And Tarkin getting some value here for the first time in this game. The 7th Fleet Defender now a 4-3 with the shield token. Alex does have the initiative and does have the early advantage in the damage race and has a slightly bigger unit on the board. That blue leader's a 5-5, and we're going to see 5 quick damage to David's base. That's 11 damage on.
Yeah. Alex is definitely leading in the early damage race here, but we'll see what David has. The Tarkin flip turn is interesting because you can potentially actually use Tarkin's ability twice. First as a leader and then second as a unit, but it looks like he's going to just deploy Tarkin without using the leader ability first.
Yeah, here is Grand Moff Tarkin being deployed with David's first action on this turn. Han action ability use 6 resources now for Alex. You get to take a card from your hand, put it into play as a ready resource. That brings 6 total resources. Han is now deployed as well. Oh, but here's a big play tower, overwhelming barrage onto the 7th Fleet Defender, which now was a 5 power because of those 2 experience tokens. Han immediately defeated, and Alex will not have the big 5, 6, 7.
Yeah, that's big. One of the plays that has really been relevant and effective for Han Solo builds is that 567, like you were saying. Waylay here on the 7th Fleet Defender is not at all bad, though.
No, not at all. So back and forth punches early here. The damage race still in favor of Alex, and it's Tarkin versus Blue Leader right now. And all the work that David put in to make that 7th Fleet Defender quite the threat erased.
Yep, it's an interesting situation here. Alex does seem fairly ahead with not only the race, but also Tarkin on the board is decent, but Tarkin is not really a direct combat sort of leader. He's more of a support piece. The 2-7 stat line is not that great. The main thing that he does is buff your Imperial units, and there aren't Imperial units on the board to buff right now.
Yeah, once again, no Imperials. We saw this early in the game. David didn't have those Imperials out, and now Tarkin has no other friendly Imperial units to buff. Action on David. Let's see what the first play is going to be. Maybe contemplating spending 3 resources. We know that he has the 7th Fleet Defender in hand. That is certainly an option, but keep in mind that blue leader is just chipping away here. 5 damage a turn. Certainly nothing to laugh about here. That's quite a bit of damage.
Yep. It's going to be interesting to see what happens here. We've seen these waylays relevant on both sides of the board now with the stolen AT hauler waylaid earlier on. Saw the waylay on that buffed defender. Now David is bringing out Victor Leader.
Yeah, Victor Leader coming out. Now, he doesn't have any other space units at the moment, but that Victor Leader would make each other space unit that David controls, it would get +1/+1. Blue Leader doing some more work. 5 damage to David's base. Now Tarkin will go into Alex's base for 2. And now with the Victor Leader on the board, it is an Imperial unit, gets that experience token, now a 3/5, and we are going to see the Han action ability used. Tower, I think Alex is setting up for a big 7 cost play.
Yeah, we're bringing out the 7th Fleet Defender on David's side, but there's that big 7 cost play, Josh. Enfys Nest.
Oh, that's so good. Infus Nest going to bounce the Victor Leader back to David's hand. When played and on attack, that Infus Nest can return a unit that has less power than Infus Nest herself. So that is a big time play. Victor Leader had the experience token. Once again, David trying to buff up these units, and they just keep getting returned to hand.
Yep, definitely a very interesting definitely a very interesting card, this new version of Enfys Nest. We saw an earlier version of Enfys Nest in the Shadows of the Galaxy set that's also quite good in the right context, but the heroism Enfys Nest that can bounce stuff repeatedly can potentially be a major obstacle for opponents.
It absolutely can. And now David going to make kind of a power play with Darth Vader coming in. Now Vader will be set up to ambush and take out that blue leader. Vader a 5/7 with ambush, not quite enough to take out the 5/7 Infus Nest, but he will get some cards here as well. Let's see what he finds. He finds a Tile Fighter and a Bazine off of Vader, so getting some extra value here.
Let's see here.
So with the Bazine, we see Cura and Surprise Strike in hand, and David will actually have Alex discard the Surprise Strike. Alex does get to draw a card, and now David has to decide where the ambush is going. Darth Vader ambushing and defeating the blue leader. Now Alex down to just Enfys Nest on the board.
Now, this Enfys Nest, as we can see with the card highlight here, has the ability to return an enemy non-leader power than this unit to its owner's hand, which actually means most of the board here could potentially be bounced with this attack. We'll have to see what Alex chooses.
So attacking into base for 5, bouncing the 7th Fleet Defender. It's the second time we've seen that 7th Fleet Defender bounced this game. First time it was with Waylay, this time with Enfys Nest. Action back over to David. Keep in mind, David is up to 21 damage on his base. Certainly going to have to be careful here. A Surprise Strike or even a Hotshot Blaster with Enfys Nest gets David eerily close in game 1.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation. One of the things to note about Enfys Nest also is because that ability is based on her current power. If you do increase her power, it increases the number of things that she can bounce.
Yeah, that is a great point. One of the big plays with Han and Enfys Nest, Hotshot Blaster onto Enfys Nest becomes a 7/7. So now you can bounce an enemy non-leader unit with 6 or less power, and the options just really open up. Now we do see Cura coming out for Alex, so we'll be able to make potentially one of those cards in David's hand cost 3 more resources while Cura is in play. David just claims the initiative.
Yeah, we're gonna see what Alex has. Well, hmm. So that Vader now has 6 power. Is that correct?
Yes, I do think the Vader was the one buffed with Tarkin attack.
Yeah, I think I see a green die on there, but that's still not enough to defeat that Enfys Nest in one hit. And Enfys Nest is, I think, the main threat here for Alex by a lot. What could David have to deal with that? So an overwhelming barrage, maybe. What was named with Kira here?
That is a good question, and I am not 100% sure, but you
There's
called
a
it.
barrage.
Overwhelming barrage will overwhelm Enfys Nest. Enfys Nest defeated, and a damage going through to Kira.
And I think it also answered my question about what card was named because it looks like we've actually seen 8 resources exhausted for that overwhelming barrage. So Kira had named barrage, but David found it still worthwhile to use all available resources to fire off the barrage. And yeah, I mean, I think that may well have been a correct choice. That Enfys Nest was a huge threat.
No doubt about it. Now, Kira's still there. She was ready. Gets in for 3 damage. That's 24 damage on David's base. 6 HP remaining. But now David has quite the board here. Obviously can take out Cura. We'll see if that is the play or if he holds Vader a little bit longer. Of course, you always get the possibility of another waylay, and David would hate to see Vader waylaid in this spot. Of course, I guess you could argue there that if Vader gets waylaid, of course, he will get the ambush and win played ability again, so could turn out okay in the end. But David needs to answer these threats, and Vader will attack and defeat Cura.
Yeah. Now, Falcon in the space arena is also a pretty major threat, though. How will David handle that? No resources available, so I don't think there's going to be any way to clear it this turn.
Yeah, you are absolutely right. Tarkin gets in for 2, another experience token given to Darth Vader, and that is actually going to keep Darth Vader alive at the end of this round. It had 8 damage on, and it was
Now,
only
wait,
surviving because of Barrage.
what is that? A pilot was just put on that Falcon. What pilot is that?
I do believe that's the Luke Skywalker, You Still With Me?
Ah.
which gives +3/+2, but that new Falcon gets +1 for the upgrade on it. So that Falcon, I believe, is a 7 power, which means one swing from Alex with that Falcon. This game one is in the books.
Can David find some kind of answer to that Falcon? If not, I think you're right, Josh. I think that's it.
So here we go. David was able to claim the initiative after Luke was put on as a pilot upgrade. Do we have another option? Maybe another overwhelming barrage. I believe the Falcon is only 6 HP, so an overwhelming barrage onto Vader would take care of it. Of course, he could have a Space Sentinel, something like that. Claire pulling up the hand cams for us. Do we have an answer? Oh, we have Confiscate to defeat Luke. That sends Luke into the ground arena, though, so Alex not fully losing Luke. Luke offers so much value.
Yeah, that Luke is a I think the pilots that have some degree of resilience to upgrade removal are some of the best ones, whether that be via some value that you get when immediately playing them, or via the ones that are resistant to it, as we see with this Luke, and actually with the leader Luke being even more resilient to upgrade removal. And yeah, here, even though there is that confiscate, Luke still enters the board as a ground unit. Now, to be fair, I don't think David's going to have too much trouble dealing with this Luke on the ground, but it is going to be at least a bit of a speed bump, perhaps.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Now, keep in mind, Luke was removed from Millennium Falcon, but the Falcon still attacking for 3, putting David up now to 27 damage on base, meaning either one of these units on the board representing Fatal.
Yeah, now I think I see on the hand cam there, I believe there's a Snowtrooper Lieutenant in hand for David, which would allow this TIE LN to trade with the Millennium Falcon. And that's
Oh,
exactly what we're seeing.
that's a big play. Very nicely done. The TIE LN fighter taking out the Falcon, but Alex with a big response is going to possibly just replenish this board with U-Wing reinforcement.
If I'm Alex, what I'm looking to do with this U-ring reinforcement is try to develop ideally multiple units in the space arena that are going to allow the situation to threaten my opponent where they're weak. Right now, David has a very strong ground arena, but nothing in space. Even just bringing out like 2 ships with decent attack could be a huge problem for David.
One thing that Alex would have loved to find, space units for sure. The Millennium Falcon, the Spark of Rebellion, Millennium Falcon, piece of junk would have been big. Not finding it here, as that would have represented Fatal right away, but it is going to be Luke Skywalker coming in, giving that -6 to Darth Vader, and the big threat on David's side of the board is defeated.
Yeah, this is the casino style out of aspect Luke Skywalker because of the way that Ewing works. It ignores aspect penalties when playing cards, and we've seen some of these Han Solo Spark of Rebellion decks using U-wing reinforcements to bring in cards that are out of aspect, sometimes far out of aspect, with Luke Skywalker Jedi Knight being a popular choice.
Yeah, such a good out of aspect card for this Han deck with U-Wing reinforcement. It's definitely something we've been seeing quite a bit for many, many months. And Alex now with a big edge, and David doesn't find anything off the top to deal with Luke Skywalker. Alex taking game one in the final round of Swiss.
Yeah, that was an interesting back and forth. It seemed like David got off to kind of a slow start, not really the buildup that Tarkin most wants to see, but then had some momentum going there with the Darth Vader and so on. However, Alex had already done a bunch of damage to the base and was able to find some units and push through.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So definitely a matchup that seems like it could be a little tough for Tarkin here, just based on the fact that Alex has so many good ways to kind of deal with those space threats. between returning them to hand. Obviously, the 7th Fleet Defender with the shield token was bounced back multiple times. That was very important for Alex. And then also having answers to things like the lurking TIE Phantom and some of these smaller space units that can be taken out by things like Blue Leader and Falcon before they ever have a chance to really get buffed. But again, those bounce effects so good against these units that are getting those experience tokens.
Yeah, it's that was an interesting game, and it was a bit of a lengthy game, not not a 45-minute game or anything super crazy. But if they end up going to the third game of this match, and they all proceed at that pace, the last one is going to be pretty tight on time.
Yeah, you do make a very good point. We have seen that multiple times throughout this event where that first game took about 20 minutes or a little bit more, and then it ends up going to game three, and then things get really tight on time. We've seen it at least a few times throughout the previous 12 rounds that we've covered. Hopefully, we will get this match to a conclusion.
Yeah, I think in those 12 rounds, we've had something like 2 or 3 draws, plus another one that would have been a draw, except that one of the players conceded at the end. And now the players are making those sideboard decisions, and we're about to see what comes next. Now, little happy trees in the Twitch chat saying, I can't wait for Han to rotate. Resource jumping on a leader isn't. I think I wouldn't put it that strongly necessarily, trees, but I do think I'm not the most fond of Spark of Rebellion Han's play pattern. I think that I personally consider the Shadows of the Galaxy Han to be significantly more interesting. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I think the Han Solo Audacious Smuggler is kind of interesting because I don't know if you remember this tower, but back when Spark of Rebellion first came out and the first, several larger tournaments that we had, at least initially, Han was not heavily played. It's like people just hadn't figured out how good Han was early, kind of, looked past it a little bit. But then as we got later into the Spark of Rebellion meta, we saw the Han Green really start to become a thing and was, winning showdowns and, having really good runs in different events like Star City games. And then ever since, really the end of set one, this Han deck has been a real threat. We've, of course, seen Han Yellow be very popular, of course, before DJ was suspended. But I mean, Han has such a good ability. And yes, being able to ramp up unconditionally, right? You just have to have a card in your hand and you're going to be able to play with one extra resource that turn. It really gives you such a big advantage in some situations.
Yeah. And there are some specific interactions where Han's ability is extra good. I think very thematic synergy with the classic Millennium Falcon, where
Oh,
the
yeah.
timings of those two abilities mean that if you've used Han's ability to get an additional resource, you don't have to pay the upkeep cost for the Falcon on the next turn. I think that's a cool interaction, but I don't know. It's a little complicated. It's easy to it can easily lead to errors with respect to like just not removing resources correctly or not really being on top of that stuff. And I don't know. I wouldn't say I don't hate this version of Han, but I don't think he's my favorite. And also not my favorite art piece in the game. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, that's definitely a pretty common theme, I think, between a lot or amongst a lot of the community. Absolutely, definitely not the best artwork that we've seen out there on the leaders, but
In
definitely a
defense
very strong
also
card.
of the art, I will say I don't think it's a bad illustration. I just think it's such a different art style than most of the
Different,
rest of the
yes,
game
that's
that
a
it's
good
a little
word. Yep.
jarring.
Yeah, I think that's mainly it. It's not that it's bad art; it's just very different, right? I think that's it's a good way to put it. Now here we go,
And here,
turn one. Now this could be interesting. Scanning officer not finding
miss.
any smuggle.
That is a miss. Now, scanning officer, you can potentially use that and mess up your opponent's first turn. The scanning officer doesn't permanently deramp an opponent, but if you defeat one of their resources while it's ready and replace it with an exhausted resource, that can be a significant blow to the opponent's momentum.
Absolutely. In this case, David would have loved to find a smuggle card in those two resources, but did not. Alex using the Han action ability, going up to three resources, and once again, being able to play a three-cost space unit on turn one. This time, the Millennium Falcon that enters play ready, three quick damage to David's base. And Tower, you talked about that synergy with Millennium Falcon and Han Solo, and that is exactly what we saw. Alex had to defeat a resource, paying the Falcon tax with that resource first, then defeating it, and now still three ready resources. Oh,
Oh,
it's
this
another
time,
scanning officer.
yeah, this time the scanning officer hits and it knocks out a hotshot deal 44 blaster. That's going to drop Alex down to just two resources available, though, of course, Han's ability could be used for a temporary resource.
And that is what we will see. But what a play from David. I think finding a scanning officer off the top there, only had one in the opening hand, I believe, with the hand cam that we saw, and then finding another one. And you think Alex was probably thinking, I'm safe, I'm good to go. No way there's another officer. Boom, turn two, another officer. But hey, Alex says, that's all right. I'm going to be aggressive. Chewbacca, pilot coming onto Millennium Falcon, swinging for six.
This might be tough for David to deal with, Josh. The Chewbacca pilot buffing that Falcon not only gives it +3/+3, but also means that it cannot be defeated. Now, being directly defeated isn't necessarily a huge worry when you're looking at an opponent who is using a cunning villainy deck like this with command. Those don't tend to have the same direct defeat effects as vigilance, but Pilot Chewie also means that the unit can't be returned to hand by enemy card abilities. So if we see one of those waylays or similar, that is not going to work on that Falcon.
You are absolutely right. Falcon with Chewbacca, that is a problem and is really going to start putting David on a clock. 6 damage per turn. That is a very big deal. Four more swings with the Falcon alone would wrap this up. Now we're going to start David with the initiative, and we're going to get in for two with the scanning officer, but Alex getting in for that 6 damage with Falcon, and that's going to bring David all the way up to 15 damage on his base, and we're just 3 turns in this game.
Yeah, the damage is really adding up on David's base, and I'm not sure what his best move to deal with it's going to be.
Now, we do see a tie advanced coming out for David. That does give 2 experience tokens to another Imperial unit here. So the scanning officer that already had an experience token getting 2 more. That scanning officer all of a sudden a 5/6 now, getting in for 5. We've got 10 damage on Alex's base, but look at this. Alex has continued to pressure the space arena. Stolen AT hauler coming back out.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation, but Alex is winning this race. We're looking at 15 damage on David's base, only 10 on Alex's base. And if we look at the amount of power represented on the field there, the buffed scanning officer is 5, and then we have another 5 with the other scanning officer and the tie advance. That's 10 power from David, but we also have 10 power from Alex with the buffed Falcon plus the stolen AT hauler. And you know, I don't know. I'm not sure David is gonna be able to keep up in this race.
Yeah, I think that is a great point. The race here definitely in Alex's favor. David will have to find something to mitigate all of the damage coming through in the space arena, needs to find some sort of answers because right now that Falcon really threatening. And of course, the AT hauler has great stats as well. Look at this surprise strike from Alex and the Falcon swinging in for 9 damage. What a big swing.
Yeah, this is looking really bad for David now. We're at 24 damage on base, 6 HP left. A surprise strike or even a smaller buff on that stolen AT hauler could win the game, or just a stolen AT hauler attack plus Han playing a temporary resource, then deploying, that would be enough for lethal also. I don't know if David can get out of this.
Now, David is going to use the Tarkin ability, the tie advance.
Attack plus Han playing a temporary resource, then deploying, that would be enough for lethal also. I don't know if David can get out of this.
Now, David is going to use the Tarkin ability, the tie advance, getting an extra a chance to deploy Tarkin.
Yeah, if we had seen the if we had seen the scanning officer hit on the first turn and deny that turn one Falcon, we might have had a very different, but it was not to be, and that Falcon with Chewie on it, very resilient to a lot of things that could otherwise disrupt it. I think maybe the best option would have been some kind of exhaust effect on No Good to Me Dead or something. Not that I'm sure that David is necessarily even running that, but fundamentally, I think it's a bit of a bad matchup for the Tarkin Cunning deck, because the Tarkin deck often wants to go into space and buff up space units. That's the play pattern that deck would often see back in the day. And dealing with an opponent that's faster than you in space and has stronger stuff, it's difficult to get that foothold and get established up there.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely feels like a difficult matchup for that Tarkin deck without a doubt. As unfortunately, Tarkin falling in 2 games, we will not have that deciding game 3. But that wraps it up for Swiss. 13 rounds of Swiss in the books, and now it's just a matter of waiting for these final matches to be reported, and then we are going to have the top cut from Minneapolis. Man, it is getting exciting. Things are heating up here in Minnesota, Tower.
Yeah, that was another relatively quick match compared to some of the ones that we've seen. Should be interesting to see how the other matches do. Now, I do believe that at least some of the top players in this event have ended up going with the old intentional draws. So that is an option. So, for instance, if you're Wu and you're the only player undefeated, you are locked to not only be you're locked to not only make the top cut, but to be the number one player after Swiss if you ID at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. So we know that Wu will be in the top 8. So we're guaranteed to have Cura Data Vault, at least one Cura in the top 8. And I'm just going through, I'm looking at the tables here. So essentially, table 2 did get the intentional draw. That was Alex Blandon and Cole Lapine. That was the Han 2 blue player, the only Han 2 blue that made day 2. And that was an intentional draw. And looking at the standings going into the final round, that was your number 2 and number 3 seed at 10 and 2. So it's very likely that that intentional draw is good for both of those players. And that means that we get a couple Han solos in the top 8, Han 2 blue and Alex Blandon on Han Command Center. So the Han green, probably very similar to what we just saw on stream.
Yep. Should be interesting to see what the final top 8 ends up being, but I suspect we're going to see some strong players and have some interesting matches once we get right down to it. Now, I do believe there is likely going to be a bit of a break in between the last round of Swiss and before the top cut. I think there's a good chance that we're going to see. I don't know. I don't remember the exact timing, but I know at Denver they were calling the players that had won the various showcases after the final standings were determined. They were calling those players up to receive their prizes and so on, and people were clapping for them and all that. So we may have a bit more of a break before we move on to the top 8, but we will be bringing you some of the final matches there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Can't wait for the top cut. Should be a blast. And at least what we're looking at going into this round, Tower, I think we're going to have a pretty diverse top cut, as the top 8 going into this final round. It looks like the only repeat deck, we had 2 Quinlan Tarkentown in the top 8, but everything else was different. So let's hope that we get a super diverse final top cut.
Yeah, could be very exciting there, Josh. And I'll also say it's not as if it's some disaster if there's repeat decks in the top 8. You know what I mean? Like, it
Yeah.
is what it is. That happens. Um, but I personally find it very exciting when there's more of a variety up there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You love to see the variety and that's what we've been getting recently, which is awesome, right? We've been getting a lot of these like for instance these PQ top 8s and even the top 8s at the major events, right? Pretty diverse, seeing some different things do well. And hey, right now in this meta, we're wide open. People are excited about it. I'm excited about it. I know that it was tough for a lot of these players to decide what they were going to play. Maybe not if your name is Ophir, right? Wu has been pretty tried and true with Kira Dataval. But other than that, some of these players I know had some difficulties making their decision and really didn't make their decision until the final couple days before the event.
Yeah, I will also say that I don't think Wu is like a 100% super purist or whatever. Like
Right.
I actually I ran up against him in Denver and he was playing Quinlan at that time. But
Okay.
I do think that the Kira Green in one permutation or another is a bit of a signature deck for him.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the blue-green villainy has been something he has, as you mentioned earlier, championed for some time. And, a lot of the community looks to him for really good insight in those or in that particular archetype. And he certainly has had great success. And we'll see if he ends up going undefeated and no. So that match has been reported. So Wu actually falling to Christopher Lewis. I believe that's Cluis from Bothan Network on Quinlan Tarkentown. So Wu dropping his first match in the tournament as Christopher Lewis takes it 2-1. So Wu does lose one. We don't have any undefeated through Swiss here in Minneapolis.
All right. Interesting then that there was no interesting there that there was no ID up there if that's indeed the case. And could be very could also be a situation where people just want to play it out. Fundamentally speaking, yeah, it's been a long day. Yeah, there have been a lot of games, but at the same time, this is a game and playing it's fun. You know what I mean? You might be in a situation where it doesn't really matter for the tournament, but you still want to play a game.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do believe we are still waiting for, it looks like 5 matches are still, well, now it's down to 3 matches, I think, that we're waiting on to be reported and conclude our Swiss rounds and get our official top 8. So I think we are going to go to a break. This one might be a little more extended. We'll see. We'll get some stats for you. We'll get the top 8. We'll come back with all the information you're looking for. Stay tuned. We've got more action, the top cut coming from Minneapolis.
See you guys soon.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the live stream here on McClunky Gaming, the Star Wars Unlimited Regional Qualifier in Minneapolis. We are down to the final 8 players. I'm Josh Snyder. We've got Tower number 9 with me, bringing you commentary. We've got the top cut action coming up. Tower, how we feeling? All right, I don't think we have Tower right now. Tower will be back momentarily, but Claire does have the top 8 on the screen for us. This should be the top cut right here. And it looks as though we have 2 Quinlan Tarkentown. And if I'm not mistaken, that is the only repeat. So 2 Quinlan Tarkentown. We've got Kira Datavault on top. Cad Bane Tarkentown, a deck that has kind of not been very represented lately, hasn't really been putting on big performances or putting up big performances. Cad Bane, 3rd seed, going into the top 8. You love to see that. We do have 2 Han Solo, but the different Han Solos. We've got the Han Solo from Shadows of the Galaxy, Han 2 Blue, piloted by Cole. Cole was on the McClunky stream earlier. He's the 4 seed. We've got Alex Blandon from KTOD on Han as well. That's the Spark of Rebellion Han, so Han green. And then it looks like we've got 1 Sabine ECL and 1 Ray Data Vault. So we get at least 1 of each of the big hitters, right? We've got Kira, Han, Sabine, Ray, and then Quinlan. Also, even though Quinlan's been on a downtick lately, 2 Quinlan in the top 8. Tower, are you back with us?
I am.
We are ready to go. What do you think about this top 8, Tower?
A lot of variety there. We are seeing the 2 Quinlans, but it looks like it's 2 Hans, but it's 2 different Hans. It's kind of funny. We've been talking about Quinlan maybe not doing as well recently as he had been earlier, but actually the only leader to have 2 copies in that top 8.
Yeah, absolutely. So, love to see it. I mean, we've kind of talked about it throughout this weekend how Quinlan just really hasn't been performing all that well outside of course, the big runner up finish at the Richmond sector. But getting to Quinlan Tarkentown here in the top 8, who knows? Maybe Quinlan has its opportunity to shine.
Yeah. We could see it. And also, a range of different things here, but it looks like the meta is it looks like what we're seeing here is a relative. I would say that the Cura deck is a bit more control oriented and Sabine is a bit more aggro, but we're not seeing any super hard controls. There's not a double blue Iden or any of those sorts of things. And we do have the one Sabine, but not seeing a ton of aggro decks here either necessarily.
Yeah, you are absolutely right. So, really, more of these mid-range, or maybe if you want to go soft control in terms of Cura, Cura can maybe be classified in either of those categories. But yeah, no hard control decks and only 1 aggro deck. I will say something that kind of stands out to me a little bit is Team KTOD Tower actually getting in, if I'm not mistaken, that's 4 of their 8 team members that were here this weekend. Ophir, Alex, CJ, and John all making the top 8. 50% of the team being in top 8. Very successful weekend for KTOD.
Yeah, good showing for the KTOD tournament team there. We'll be
Now,
we'll be interested to see just who ends up winning it, but I think there's going to be some interesting matches. It's very much not going to be a bunch of Django mirrors as we saw with some of the previous events before FFG made those suspensions.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, very likely not going to see a mirror at all, right? Let's see, where's the 2 Quinlans? We've got the 8 seed is Quinlan and the 2 seed. So yeah, I don't think we're going to see a mirror, at least not in the top 8. So, yeah, let's see. Chat, what do we think here? I mean, is there any specific matches that the viewers would love to see? Maybe we can get some feedback from some of the viewers on a specific matchup they would love to see. Again, looking at this lineup of 8 players. But I will say, for me, Tower, the two big standouts, Han to Blue, because Han to Blue really, we haven't seen that in quite some time, and Cad Bane Tarkentown. I think those two coming into this tournament were certainly not high up on many players' radars, and here we have one of each in the top 8. So I think those two probably the two kind of surprise decks, two great decks, and of course Cad Tarkentown has had more recent success than Han 2 Blue, but nevertheless, on the trend lately, Cad Bane Tarkentown really hasn't been that existent in the meta, so I love to see it here in the top 8.
Yeah, I think both of those are interesting and unusual builds. So it looks like we do have the bracket here, and there's some different thoughts from different viewers about what they would most like to see. Um, I do think that Cad Bane match might be interesting. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there are going to be a bunch of good games here.
Yeah, it's like we've got some different matchups that people are calling for. I think the one that stands out to me here of these, I think, is the Han versus Han. I think that stands out the most to me. You've got Alex
Set
Blandon
one
versus
Han
Cole
versus set
Lapine.
two
Yeah,
Han.
I think that's the standout in my opinion. I mean, these are two incredible players. I think yeah, Claire, let's go with the Han versus Han. The
Yeah,
only
it should
two
be.
Hans to make the top 8. If we can get that one, I think that would be fun.
Which Han will move on, be knocked out? Should be an interesting match.
Yeah, absolutely. Some great players. Now, I don't have, unfortunately, we heard about the team earlier. I think it was the Canadian Snow Troopers, as Cole, I believe, came in. I think it was from Toronto, but that's the only information I have on Cole. But Alex Blandon from KTOD, this is a sector qualifier, top 8 finisher, 3-time PQ champion. He's got 9 PQ top 8s. He was the planetary qualifier Energizer Bunny in the last set of planetary qualifiers. He also has the win under his belt in the team event at Beato, and also won one of the 2K events at Star City Games. So a very decorated player in Alex Blandon, and I think that would be quite the showdown.
Yeah, could be a very interesting match. Now, I believe things are not not fully set up. I think they've been doing some the showcase prize ceremony or whatever. So for those who might be unfamiliar with this, these events are awarding a showcase of each leader to the best performing player with that leader who at least made top 64. So you do have to make the top 64, but if you make the top 64 and have the best final standings before the cut with your leader, you do win a showcase, I believe. And so at least when I was out at the sector qualifier over in Denver, they had a bit of a thing there with Corey from FFG reading out the names of the players who had been the top performers with their leaders, and people would go up and get a showcase, and the fans would applaud. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, that really is exciting. And I was just kind of looking through the standings. I could not remember his name. Oh, here it is. Joe Kaufman. That was our Luke player yesterday. And, we talked about the showcase hunting, the super rare Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader, the two starter deck leaders from Spark of Rebellion, as how you can get the showcase of those two in this tournament. There was no Darth Vader decks, the Spark of Rebellion Darth Vader that made it into day 2, but we had that one Luke, that was Joe. We actually saw him on stream yesterday, and it looks like he ended up in the top 30, around 22nd or 23rd, at least going into last round. So, yeah, very cool that at least one more Luke will go into the wild, that Luke showcase.
Nice, yeah. And the other thing about the way these showcases work is it's possible that a specific leader, nobody will be in the top 64 with that leader. It's very possible. So not all of the showcases are necessarily going to be awarded at any given event.
Yeah, no, that is a really good point. And we are getting some more information from chat, getting some information on one of the other players that made the top 8, Ray 10 from Team Buckeye and Friends from Columbus, Ohio. So Ray coming in from Columbus. That is I believe that's the Cad Bane Tarkentown that made the top 8. So love getting some more information on our players here.
Yeah. We should be seeing some good matches, and I think that many of these players are already pretty known in the community, and I think those that might be less known are probably going to have their profile increase a bit thanks to this performance.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So little bit of a heartbreak, and I know that this was being talked about on one of the other streams. The Sea Raptor stream, I think, is that one game that everyone was waiting on so we could get into the top 8 and find out our standings. There was several draws, I think, with the X and 2 players. There was several 10 and 2 players that just did the intentional draw. So Ophir or Wu actually losing that last round unfortunately meant that one of the players that opted to do the intentional draw was going to miss out on the top 8, and that one player that missed out at X2 and 1 is Carlos Torres from Botha Network. We saw Carlos on stream earlier with the Darth Vader yellow deck, the Vader from Jump to Lightspeed. So Carlos just missing out on the tiebreakers. So unfortunately, we will not see the Jump to Lightspeed Vader in the top 8.
Yeah, that is unfortunate. I think it's a cool build, but ultimately one that had some strong performances, but not quite enough to get into the very competitive top 8 at this event.
Yeah, definitely a wonderful achievement to make it all the way to the top cut. And as far as the teams are concerned, we mentioned 4 KTOD team members making it to the top 8, and then 1 Bothan Network player. And I don't think we had any Team Secret or McClunky Gaming, unfortunately. But yeah, nevertheless, it still should be very exciting. And the brackets, I think we're getting the brackets together now. So Cole and Alex, that's the 4 and 5 seed, and that's hopefully what we'll be getting for you here on the McClunky Gaming stream.
We will have to see how this goes. These matches should hopefully be set up soon. And I think the players are probably a little tired themselves after a long 2 days of Star Wars Unlimited, but there are those last few matches waiting to go here. We're going to have, there's going to be a top 8, then we're going to have a top 4, and then the finals. So 3 more matches to go before this event concludes. And should be a nice wrap up to an exciting weekend of Star Wars Unlimited TCG.
I think exciting is a great way to describe it. Now, it's absolutely going to be hard, Tower, and maybe you just can't make that pick. But looking at this top 8, is there one player or deck that you really feel has a very strong chance to come out on top?
Of those, I think there are a lot of strong leaders, a lot of strong builds, a lot of strong players. I would say based on the very strong Swiss performance, my favorite to win would probably be Wu and his Kira deck, but I'm not saying it's a lock by any means. I think they got a bunch of strong players up there, and it could go any of multiple ways.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. The
Any of multiple ways.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. The round, or excuse me, the quarterfinal matchups, it'll be Kura Datavault versus Quinlan Tarkentown. You'll have Han 2 Blue versus Han 1 Green, Quinlan Tarkentown versus Ray Datavault, and then Cad Tarkentown versus Sabine ECL. And extremely tight field in the top 8. I think if I had to pick just one tower, and this is so tough, but I think if I have to pick just one, I think the favorite for me deck wise, just based on the many great performances he's had, I think that Alex Blandon might be my pick to take it all here in the top cut. But as you mentioned, Wu obviously 12-1 throughout the weekend, just an insane performance, and coming off the PQ win, I know he's got a lot of momentum right now.
Yeah, well, Alex Blandon's a quite a strong player as well. I think he's done very well for himself in several past events, and I mean, really, a bunch of the people here are names that we're a little familiar with, having done a bunch of broadcasts before for PQs and SCG events and other things. You do end up running into some of the same names in terms of the well-known tournament competitors for the game. Let's see here. I am seeing some people moving around in the background, but I'm not sure that it's necessarily the players going to get set up. I think there's a lot of things going on. Probably still some side events going on, and we will hopefully have that first match of the top cut with you guys up here for you guys shortly. But we'll have to see how it goes. Chat, who are you cheering for? Are there any particular people that you guys think are your favorites to win the event? I'd be curious to hear it. Now, Ty Fabes in the chat said, "What a great post Django meta," and I do agree with that. I think we have a situation where the you know I don't even think it was necessarily that bad. I don't think Django was unbeatable, but we had a situation where ultimately Django ended up being a very large fraction of some of these top cuts, and that's very much not what we're seeing here post suspension. So I think they've done a good job of really opening up the meta.
Yeah, I think it's been wonderful ever since they made those most recent suspensions. Django was certainly beatable, but I guess it was just tough because Tower, to beat Django, it felt like people had to have decks that were very tuned, very specific answers, and I think just all of the tools that Django got, they were just too much. But certainly beatable. But man, I tell you, the numbers that Django put up were quite crazy ever since Jump to Lightspeed released. But now, as soon as the suspensions come off, I mean, the meta has just been absolutely insane. So many viable leaders right now. We've seen so many leaders with success, especially in the PQ realm, and you love to see that. And I know overall for the players, they love to see it as well. It just feels good.
Yeah,